Okay, today is Tuesday, November 22nd. It's 1 p.m. This is a Prescott City Council study session. We can start with roll call, please.
Mayor Good.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Singh.
Here.
Councilwoman Kentelmi.
Here.
Councilman Montoya.
Here.
Councilman Moore.
Here.
Councilman Sishka.
Here.
And Councilman Tenney.
Yes, ma'am.
All are present.
Excellent. So you want to read our first discussion item?
I
and
do.
only, I believe.
Discussion and presentation regarding opportunity to innovate local government procurement and delivery of services processes.
Thank you, Sarah. Mayor and Council, I'm Mark Woodfeld, the Budget and Finance Director. I'll speak up so you can hear me over the audience today. We're relatively full.
Cheering.
Keep it down out there, will you?
Yeah.
Keep it down out there.
This is an important topic. I'm sorry more of the public obviously isn't here to discuss or to hear, but you might not realize this, but government operations are relatively bureaucratic. Might be news to you.
And write that down.
Yeah, write that down.
No.
There's several things you should write down today.
Me?
No. White people in general. Being bureaucratic, we're very slow to move. We're slow to get anything done. You might have noticed that as well. And we're especially slow to adapt. And this is costly. It's costly because it takes a lot of additional staff time. It takes council time. It takes the public time. A lot of issues there. The goal with what we're presenting today is to start to move into a more efficient approach. We, in the last budget cycle, we set up a purchasing area to start re-centralizing the purchasing functions of the city to try to bring some of the inefficiencies that happened when it got decentralized several years ago. Some of the things that aren't getting done correctly because it got decentralized and got put onto people that their primary duty isn't purchasing. So they don't always do everything that they're supposed to. They don't always dot all the T's and cross all the I's, as they say. So our goal with the changes, and our goal is always to increase transparency, is to increase input into our governmental process. Not just increase input, but increase it at the appropriate time when something can be done about it. Please try to stay awake, Councilman Moore.
I thought you said this was going to be scintillating.
This is scintillating. I'm doing the best I can.
Remember, he's an accountant.
You know, we get a lot of input, as I heard some of the council talking on their way in this morning. We get a lot of input on things, but it's not always constructive input, if you will. It's not always constructive. It's not always put forward at the time when it can have the greatest impact on how we do things. It's kind of after the fact, after thousands of hours of staff time have gone into a project, and we're ready to pull the trigger. Oh, well, here's all this input. Well, we need to get the input up front when it can actually direct the way things are done. And that'll create efficiency, and that's what our overall goal is here. So today, we're only going to focus on two areas, which is procurement and the delivery of service. We'll leave the others for another day. Currently, we bring forward the budget, and all items that we need to do for next year purchase are in that budget, and they're viewed at the annual budget workshops through that whole process in kind of a summary form, granted, at our current time. And then if they pass there and move forward, they're brought back individually to council as the procurements are done. As staff says, okay, council said it's okay to buy these 48 replacement vehicles this year. Let's do some examples from last meeting. Here, we need to replace 48 vehicles. It's looked at in the budget process. Council says, okay, go forth. Staff goes out, spends hours and hours speccing the vehicle, getting the vehicles. They bring them back 1, 2Z, 3Z at a time to get council approval to do the purchase. And then a good idea comes up, an important idea. Hey, what about hybrids? What about, the new vehicles that are out there? Like last week. Again, that's at the wrong end of this. That kind of discussion should be at the front end when we say, here's 48 vehicles we're replacing. Council says, hey, have you considered hybrids? And staff, and council discuss it, public gives input. We decide, yeah, it's the time. No, it's not quite the time because of these reasons or whatever. The item is debated before all the staff time is spent speccing vehicles, getting the bids ready, getting the vehicles ready, seeing if we can get them, bringing it forward for council to approve the purchase. Input at that time doesn't give any time for anything to really happen. So those are the efficiencies we're trying to get rid of. We're trying to get input where it can be meaningful and useful. It's, like I say, all very time-consuming for staff, for council. It comes to council, we got to debate these things 3 different times because they come up so many different times. It makes us slow to complete the projects to get them out to the citizens, slow to get new vehicles out serving the citizens or facilities, capital, or whatever. And I contend that the massive information, we have an agenda, not necessarily today's. Today's agenda is not very long. But throughout the year, council's aware, we have very long agendas with all these different purchases on them, which are relatively clean and clear and all that. But we also have development agreements, and we have zoning issues, and we have real issues that council needs to debate and the public needs to hear about and be able to debate. But we're putting everybody to sleep because we got an hour or 2 of just bureaucratic stuff to happen. So by coming up with a better approach to buying this stuff, we can make those agendas more meaningful, more relevant, more interactive for the public to be able to participate in development agreement negotiations or zoning issues and express their concerns and not have to wait through everything. It might shock you to hear that we're not the first government to see these inefficiencies out there. A lot of governments have come up with ways to do it. Pretty aggressive ways, ways I'm not sure we're ready for here in the city of Prescott. Some governments, PV, Marana, Maricopa, Goodyear, Surprise, a lot of cities bigger than us, once the budget's adopted with items identified in it, they don't have to come back to council. The procurement is still done per the procurement code, and the mayor or the city manager signs off on the contracts, but they don't need to come back for council to say, yes, buy that vehicle. Once it's done in the budget process, it's all go. Not sure we're ready for that here in the city of Prescott. I think we need to ease into it. We chatted with the mayor a little bit, and I think we need to come up with a more streamlined approach, but not quite like that. So we got two different things we're talking about today. We're talking about a new way to approve processes, but we're also talking about we need to change some of our procurement limits that are currently out there. So we got 2 kind of separate issues for you guys to give me direction on when we get done here today of what you want me to bring back. The slowness to be effective in procurement, deal with the changing world. Government, we get 3 bids and we go forward and we go with the lowest. In today's internet world with online marketplaces like Amazon and Amazon for Business, which Amazon for Business is also capable in government operations, which we are using very effectively. You can put procurement contracts, tie them to your user account so that when somebody out in legal goes out to buy copier paper, they get the state procurement contract listed with all the other bidders from around the world. So it's not getting 3 bids, but you're in a very efficient market. You're getting the lowest price. You're getting a lower price than if you had to go find 3 people to do bids. So we're trying to take advantage of that. Right now we're 0 to 5 to purchase with the most economy as possible in the open marketplace. Again, it's a different marketplace than it used to be. We want to push that to 0 to 10. We think that's reasonable. A lot of stuff you can get cheaper on it's not state contract, but on Amazon than even on state contract. Whether it's laptops or whatever, you have a very open, agile market, and you get a good price. We also require 3 competitive quotes right now between $5,000 and $50,000. So Obviously, when you start getting up in price on things, you got to get to more specific vendors. So the Amazon open e-market doesn't really work there. So you still do get 3 competitive quotes, and we're just proposing to move that 5 to 50 to 10 to 100,000. And then the sealed bids. Sealed bids are problematic in my mind, but governments still do them. They're very time consuming. They're hard to get decent bids. You can get bids, but anybody willing to go through a sealed bid process is not going to give you the most efficient price, generally. And you know, us accountants get together and we debate that all the time because, you know, well, yeah, they can do it. Well, they can do it for private business a lot quicker than they can put together a sealed bid for government, so they're going to go build roads for a private business as opposed to build roads for us. It's going to be only the people who are familiar with the process that are willing to put in all the time it takes to do them.
Councilman Montoya had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Mark, I'm curious if you can give us an example of some of the limitations that departments are running into with that 50,000 threshold versus the 100,000 threshold.
Well, again, the issue is, are you going to get a better price?
Right.
And that's where it gets down to me. You can follow procurement, but I'm about getting the best price. To get a sealed bid on something, this came up a week or two ago, a chipper truck. We have an issue with a chipper truck. We need to get a new chipper truck. Chipper truck equipped with the back cab and the dump and all that stuff is somewhere between 50 and 100,000. We got to get a sealed bid. Well, the vendor who has the chipper truck that we need has one chipper truck because the world is the way the world is today. These things don't roll off an assembly line. They're kind of put together. And is he going to hold it for the whole sealed bid process, which require them putting together, us putting specs and them doing bids, submitting them, and then the time and process. So there's a lot of things where that sealed bid doesn't work. It's just time consuming and it doesn't get you a better bid than getting 3 independent quotes.
I appreciate that example because I think for me,
Yep.
the thing that occurs to me that what I'm hearing you say in the beginning part of this presentation is that we're losing efficiency by doing things in this specific process. And if I think we can all agree, you know, if you guys are going to go and spend $1.5 million or $1.8 million on a fire truck, probably a good idea for us to lay our eyes on that. But if you're buying a chipper truck and we're slowing down that process, that's probably, I don't think anyone else around here probably thinks, no, we need to micromanage the procurement of that. So I appreciate the example.
Mark, can I add to that too? I'm sorry, I don't mean to
Yes.
cut you off, but I just wanted to add on to that not only do we have to go through the formal bid process where we like come in here and open up the bid that we receive from the vendor, that also then if it has to come before council for approval, if depending on when the bid is opened, they could miss the next council meeting because of the way that the agenda filing period closes, and I have to have the agendas presented to council, and so then they're having to wait an additional time beyond that so that it can get on a council agenda for approval too. So there's also that step.
And Councilman Shishka.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Mark, has there been any effort to look at tying these limits to inflation?
We looked at that. We also looked at increasing them more. We ran into problems when it comes to uniform guidance, which is a federal requirement that our procurement code has to meet uniform guidance to allow us to procure for grants. You know, because we get a lot of grants through the state, everything. So we got to kind of tie it to the rules that are out there. Mm-hmm. So I think it's more an issue that we set the limits, and then every 5 years we come back and maybe look at adjusting those limits.
Well, I'm just thinking that with the transitory inflation, we may end up with a box of paper clicks costing $5,000. And so, you know, that's a ridiculous example, but, you know, I think that as part of efficiency, we need to plan ahead
Well, again,
for these eventualities.
And I did do that as we set these limits. I did take into account kind of where prices are now. Again, inflation, you know, honestly can't continue at 12 or 13% for too long before we have a real problem. But to actually tie them where they adjusted each year, I think would be problematic, especially when we come into uniform guidance, which requires us our procurement code to be at or below the required limits of the people giving us the grants. So the state of Arizona or the federal government, our procurement levels that required sealed bid have to be at or below those.
Okay, I have another question for you. Is when you said that we're not ready for Prescott Valley type budgeting, where if it's in the budget, then it doesn't get on to, up for council approval. What are the drawbacks that you feel that the city of Prescott would run into if, in fact, we tried to exercise that kind of option?
I think that's a big step, I guess, for your first year, trying something new. If I could get through the next 2 slides to kind of go over what I'm presenting, and then we can talk about that as what would be the difference between just saying everything that's talked about during the budget process is approved for you to go forward and buy. Per the procurement code, doing the bidding and stuff as outlined, but it still doesn't have to come back to us to say okay on. Let me just hit the next few if that's okay.
Yeah, I'm
with you,
sorry. Thank
Councilman.
you.
That's fine.
Thanks, Mayor.
So, and the other part of it right now, anything over 25,000, whether single year or if it's a multi-year contract, needs to come back to council. We propose that needs to go to 50. Again, that has to do with things just getting slowed down, like Sarah said, and not necessarily with the bids, but with anything. We're trying to get something fixed out there in the things, and it's $40,000, and we got to wait for another go-round of council meetings. We got to get it done. We can call it an emergency and bring it back with ratification, but it's not an emergency. It's what needs to be done. It's the stuff we have to do. Nobody's going to die. It's just we're not going to be able to provide that service soon enough. So we propose to take that to 50. This is the other part that we're proposing. As part of the budget process, we want to put together an annual approved expenditure list, which would be a list of individual contracts or purchases and things that council will look at in some level of detail during the budget process and say, yeah, we understand. Yes, that's appropriate. Yes, we're good with it. When that's adopted with the budget, we would go forward with that list of things, whether that included everything in the budget or most things in the budget or whatever council was comfortable with doing. We would go forward, do the bidding, do the quotes, not changing all that, but it would allow us to go out, get the bids, get the contract, get the work done, not have to hit a cycle and create work across several city departments. So that list would be done as part of the budget process. Staff would recommend, say, this is an item we think should be on the AEL. We had to throw an acronym because we know the mayor loves acronyms. So we'd have a new one. It's an AEL. Council will give direction during the workshop. Yeah, I'm good with it on the AEL. I'm not good with it on the AEL. As part of the budget process, we will bring back a finalized AEL. Council will be able to review it before the meeting. It's not going to be anything that we say, here's 30 pages, approve it or not. You'll have time to review it. And then bi-monthly, in our bi-monthly council reports that we all do for you, you guys love those? We love making them. In that, we will have a report on those at what's going on. Is it purchased? When's it going to be purchased? What did it come in at compared to what was it budgeted at? And so on. So, as an example, I put together an example for what the budget meetings would look like. During the budget meetings, we go over the budget and finance department, and I'd say, we did another great year, we're doing a great job, blah, blah, blah. Here's our overall expenditures and all that, and then here are our key operating items. We got a DOR. Payment due for integrated tax system modernization fees, which the legislature felt we needed to pay. It's $40,000, and we feel that it should be on the AEL. Independent auditor contract, it's a 3-year contract, probably going to be $150,000 to $200,000, probably about $50,000 or more a year. We don't think that should be on the AEL. Why don't we think that should be on the AEL? The auditor works for you guys. He's coming in to do the audit. You should have some say on who is selected as the auditor. So that is an item we feel would come back to the council. The maintenance contract on our enterprise resource system, ERP, is about $150,000 a year. That should be on the AEL. We got to do it. It's how we pay employees. It's how we collect bills. It's how we collect taxes. Tax compliance auditor contract. We actually have a contract auditor that goes out and audits our taxpayers, and we can direct and say, hey, we don't think, this Jay's Bird Barn is paying tax. You need to go out and audit them, or whoever it might be. Could have been Olson's Grain. Could have been just any of them. But anyway, that's a regular contract. It's 45. That should be on the AEL. And you'll notice it's even below 50, but it's a significant part of my operation that should be looked at during the budget process and given the go-ahead to go, even if it doesn't need to come back to council. Printing and mailing of our utility bills. We did this years ago. We used to do it all in-house. We decided it wasn't worth paying a pension to somebody to stuff envelopes all day long, so we decided to outsource it, contract it out. We do 3-year contracts, about $350,000. Why does that need to come back to council when we renew it? So that would say, yes, please put that on the AEL. Same thing, credit card fees for all of our utility accounts to pay, so on. I threw vehicles on here because I don't have any capital in finance. But I think vehicle replacement is a big area. This would be very helpful. We have 48 vehicles this year that we approved as part of the budget. A lot of vehicles, but they should all be looked at one time in the discussion of hybrids or not hybrids or Fords or Chevys or whatever council wants to debate should be done at one time up front before things are spec'd out and brought back onesie, twosies to buy. It'd be a lot more meaningful. So we threw some examples here. This is from this year. We're going to buy a Ford F-150 to replace a current investigation vehicle that has 127,000 miles on it. Again, you can see them up there. The department heads will present. Why do they need to be replaced? What's going on with them? Why a hybrid wouldn't work in this situation or whatever. And boom, boom, an estimated price would be done and they'd be put on the list. So that's how the budget process would work. And then in the bi-monthly report, you would get a report. Hey, these are actual things that I think you approved last week on the 8th. Light-duty trucks were purchased. They were budgeted at 110. They came in at 125. They were slightly over budget, 14%. Again, let me just jump back here. The proposal is if it's on the AEL within 20% of what was estimated, it would be able to go forward. If it ends up being more than that, it should come back because council may want to rethink whether they want to replace it. So on this, you can see, it came in at 14% over, but hey, we got to replace them anyway. So on and so forth as you go through those. And even things like the cart away behind concrete mixer, which is below the limit that would go to council, will still be on that report because it's still a significant piece of asset and it's still something council should know what's going on with. So again, there's how we would go, the annual license fee for the ERP system and so on. And even the Kubotas. Now the Kubotas were below that 50,000, so they probably wouldn't have needed to come back to council, but council may still want to know where they came in at. So it would be part of that thing. So the budget workshop, this is our budget calendar projected for 2024. Just to let everybody know, next Monday we have the strategic planning session, or Tuesday. Monday? Tuesday. The blue items are the public. The red items are orange items. are the changes. So instead of the current budget workshop where we kind of look overall citywide as a summary, we're going to do that at the first part, look at revenues, where our revenues estimated coming in and all those type of things. And then we're going to go into the department presentations. And instead of being the Mark Woodfell show, it'll be the department heads. I'll get up possibly and tell you some of the big numbers on the department, and then the department will get up and go through their significant operating expenses areas and answer questions and get direction from council. Like things like vehicle replacements will probably be pulled from all the departments and done all at once. Here's the 48 vehicles we're looking at doing. Went through the FARB, went through all this. City manager had us cut it down from 50 to 48 or whatever, give you kind of the background of all these steps in the budget process that you aren't involved in. But that would give you the opportunity to bring up changes you wanted to see in the city's fleet or things like that. And then the second day would be just the continuation of the departmental presentations, probably Public Works and Airport that day. We'd probably try to get everybody done, all of the little departments done the first day, have Public Works and Airport the second day, and then kind of summarize with overall budget where things ended up. And then we'll have a third day if it ends up going. So that is the basic premise. And again, we're looking at two things, the changes to our procurement levels, but also the establishment of this AEL to try to get your agenda shorter so that you can focus on the contract negotiations or the development agreement negotiations and zonings. So with that, I'm sorry, what question were we supposed to come back to?
I was asking you why
CPI.
what problems would we have with
going
going
to
to a Prescott Valley type situation, and, do we need to adjust these for CPI?
Well, the CPI thing we already discussed, but
Yeah.
our budget is very big, and our Public Works Department has a huge detail on projects, and I think, I don't know, do you guys think you'd be comfortable with it?
Well, so what you're saying is it possibly could be adding more work to you.
No, I think it would make life easier for staff, but I'm afraid that, and I look at Ashley out there, you look at, again, the way we present Public Works budget in the budget workshop is very summarized. The detail that is in the budget book that is out there is very detailed. So if you're going to know what zone 45, zone 60 connecting line and tanks for 6 million, and you can say, yes, go for that without ever seeing it again, we can give it a try. The purpose of the AEL is to kind of let you transition into that. These things are pretty obvious. We feel good with this, but, Ashley will try to cut his thing up into bite-sized pieces for you guys to understand where the projects are. And you may want to put several of them on the AEL, but some of them you might not. Again, I don't know if you want to add to that. I mean, it's Public Works has such detail. I'm not sure council's going to understand what they're approving, in that very summarized level.
So, Mayor Good and Councilman Siska, I think we could do it either way. I just think it's a matter of when do you want to see it. It would be a lot to bring forward at budget time if we were to do it the way that PV does it. For example, it can be done. I just think it's a lot of work up front. It might overwhelm you a little bit.
Well, I know we're a lot more complicated than Prescott Valley. We've got a whole lot more than they do. And so I understand that. Do you see us transitioning to a situation like that?
I think that's up to council. We can make it work either way. There are large organizations, I believe Peoria does it this way, and they're 250,000 people, so.
State of Arizona does it this way.
I mean, so there are others that do it, like Prescott Valley, and yes, we're much more complicated, particularly on the utility side. We can do it either way. One is more work in the budget, and then one is you spread that out over the year. And so I think it's really, you know,
Well-
what does the council want to see? We can make it work either way.
And, you know, starting this with an AEL,
Yeah.
maybe we're going to end up with everything on the AEL the first year. But, you know, I hate to go that way, and then halfway through the budget workshops, you guys are like, you know, this is too much. I'm not comfortable approving this. Or another thing, which you probably remember, councils in the past have said, I don't like, you know, these projects here. It's not basic services. Not to do an impression.
He's
or
gone.
anything. Yeah, I know. But that would enable that councilperson to say, no, I don't want that on the AEL because I want to be able to
Sure.
vote no on it, but I don't want to vote no on the budget as a whole.
Okay, well, thank
So
you.
I think it allows you to move that way as comfortable as you may be.
And it would be a big shift, I think, like Mark alluded to earlier, to transition everything to that model. It could be a bit of a bottleneck in that, you know, staff bringing it forward through the budget process, for staff to bring it forward and for council to review it is a big chunk to bite off. And I'm kind of with Mark on this one. That I think let's take some baby steps and we can migrate more and more projects to the AEL as over time, you know, but it could be a year down the road, 2 years down the road, we're right where you suggest
Right.
that we be. And we'll just have to understand, we're going to have to front load a lot of staff time, and you're going to have to budget time in your schedules, no pun intended, to look at all of these long list of projects, and, you know, in some level of detail. So,
And I think it's a learning process, not just for council, but for staff. You know, finance is easy because I'm not that complicated. But you get into public works, how Ashley's going to need to figure out how he can bring a project forward with enough comfort for council to be comfortable with it moving forward. And another problem with public works is I'd love to see them bring a project in within 20% of budget.
Boom. Councilman Montoya.
Thank you, Mayor. Mark, the first thing I'll say is this seems like a fairly common sense approach to me. So in the sense that you're asking for direction, I think this makes sense. I also agree with Ashley's sentiment that I think moving all at once is probably a bit too dramatic, but I think it's totally reasonable to start with this AEL approach, and then kind of we can, as we move forward as a council and as staff moves through this process, we can get a better understanding of it, and it may get to that point of being very similar to what Prescott Valley does. I think, again, I'll just say this seems like fairly common sense approach to me. I don't see anything that's, and the fact that we're kind of easing into it gives me a lot of peace of mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Councilwoman Cantelmi.
I would echo that also. But I just wanted to, for a little clarification, on the requires formal competitive sealed bid, you're not proposing doing away with the sealed bids?
No,
Just up
moving the
to
limit to 100,
okay,
which is reflective of the state.
okay,
State requires them at 100 as well.
yeah. Because that would be, my other question was a little bit about the oversight. How does that work? I mean, you're the stopping point, correct?
Well, again, I think this gives better oversight. I mean, we're adopting a procurement code that tells people how to procure things. We are re-centralizing to some level procurement with Melissa Busby, our new procurement manager, who is overseeing this and causing a great amount of heartache among some departments who have gotten a little lax in the way they do things. So, you as a policy board will adopt a policy, and us as staff will make sure that gets enforced. Again, that's hard on a decentralized procurement where everybody's just kind of doing the best they can while they do their real job. So I think it gives more oversight, frankly. It allows you to focus on the important things.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. So to be clear, if there's going to be hybrids spec'd, it's going to take place during the budgeting process and not after everything's been spec'd.
Correct, it won't be
Okay.
spec'd. If council as a whole is interested in the city moving to hybrids, staff, as they bring forward, like I say, this year 48 vehicles, when we bring forward 45 vehicles next year, the debate can happen at that time. Staff can give their concerns. You know, there can be a discussion. And if council says, well, we want to move forward with, you know, whatever, you know, this level vehicle being a hybrid, that can be spec'd that can be decided at the beginning, and that way it can be spec'd. Not after the vehicle has been selected, it's been spec'd, we've selected it, we bring it back for purchase. It's kind of too late to remake the cow out of the hamburger. It's
Okay.
That's a fantastic one.
Go ahead, Ashley.
Mayor Good, if I may, I just wanted to give you a little background. Mark was kind of looking at this, but when I was hired and I saw how many times we have to bring stuff back to council for small things that are already in the budget, like a crack seal contract. Today, you're going to see in the voting session a contract to grind down sidewalks to eliminate trip hazards. There's so many things that we bring forward that really consumes a lot of staff time, I think unnecessarily for small things. And it also delays it. And so I started kind of asking Mark a few months ago, hey, we could be more efficient here. And he was like, I agree. And I had a kind of a small idea, and he turned it into a bigger idea that he had already had in mind. And so I'll say from a public works standpoint, we are very supportive of this change. It'll greatly accelerate our ability to do city business. And, hopefully there's enough trust in what we're doing that, we have a budget and we stay within budget. If we're not able to stay within budget, we come back and see you. So we see this as a big upgrade from a public works standpoint. We certainly appreciate the council looking at it.
Councilman Tenney.
I will miss individually approving every crack seal project, but I would agree with what's been said so far that this is super common sense and seems to bring some great efficiencies. I'm confident we don't have this data, but I'd be very interested to see if we do have data on the crack seal type of things that you brought to us over the past, where the council has ever voted no on that.
Not often.
We're not using people's time effectively, and in some cases, as you've suggested, you're delaying projects to the point where it costs us more money or it can't be done appropriately or whatnot. So I really appreciate you bringing these ideas to us.
Councilwoman Ken, tell me, did you have another question?
Just turn that off,
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah, I think this is a reasonable step to streamline some of our detailed review of some of these issues. It does slow things down, and especially when you're in this kind of a dynamic inflationary environment where you may have identified an appropriate product to purchase, but as the slow movement of getting approvals finally reaches its conclusion, you lose the opportunity to get that product. And then you turn around and you're going to have to pay 50% more for it. We certainly saw that in the acquisition of our ladder truck for the fire department. So there are, I think, justifications here, especially as we set some very low limits. I used to kind of criticize the county because over there they have a administrator, but they don't have a city manager-like structure, and they have to approve every single minor approval has to be voted on by the supervisors. And you see this list of consent agenda items, and it's, as long as your arm. So sometimes the important things get missed in the overall amount of projects that are very, very small in nature. So I think having this AEL, I don't know, call it AL, and as long as we don't say, Al, can you buy a pod bay door? No, I can't do that, Dave. As long as we don't have that happen, then we should be in good shape.
Well, great. I appreciate the confidence, and we will bring forward over the next couple months the required changes to our procurement code, and to up these limits and to establish the list. Of course, the list won't actually exist until July, but at least we can get these other limits changed, and we'll bring that forward unless there's any other.
Yeah, it does, I
direction.
think, require the council to read those bi-monthly reports and see where the position is relative to your budget and how much has been spent. If we do end up with a very long-term, non-transitory inflationary environment, then we might have to revisit it maybe halfway through the budget year to see where things are going and what direction, and maybe add some additional flexibility.
Absolutely, Mayor, and a lot of that is honestly up to your management. It's up to me and Michael to say, hey, we got to hold these vehicles until the fourth quarter to make sure everything else comes in or whatever.
Right.
So, again, trying to separate the management of those functions away from the policies that govern how they happen, which is what council gives us. So as we bring this forward during the budget process, your budget review documents are going to be significantly different. We're taking a new approach to it. And, I work for the guy who works for you, but you're going to have homework and you need to do it before that budget workshop so that we can have a very productive, open debate and discussion and direct the next year's activity. I mean, to walk into that and not have looked at the backup of it, it's going to be hard for you guys to give us any meaningful direction. So with that, we have an hour and 15 minutes left. What would you like to discuss?
Well, I actually made a note here because I think some of your opening remarks is something that we probably need to encourage the public at large to do when there is opportunity for input at the beginning of a major project. We need to encourage people more to participate in that so that we have a better understanding of what the community at large is interested in, rather than after the decision has been made, then we get an overwhelming amount of criticism for not listening to their needs when we've never heard them.
Exactly.
So I think I'll make that part of one of my monthly updates for the public. So thank you for that. And I think taking a kind of medium step here, see how well it works. In the future, we might even expand it somewhat if it turns out to be as efficient as Mark claims it will be.
And again, the OWL will give you that option because you can add as many things as you want to it. So the first year there might double in size every year until it consumes us all.
Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you for this presentation. Any other questions or comments from anyone? No, then this study session is adjourned.